I was talking to an Army officer who had been at the camp where Elvis Presley is. All of the kidding and the ribbing about getting his hair cut and all of that, he took it all like...
For 23 years, if you wanted to make it big in American entertainment, you had to go through one man, Ed Sullivan. His Sunday night variety show wasn't just TV, okay? It was a cultural launching pad, a machine that could make you a superstar overnight. An appearance on his New York stage was the single biggest booking in show business. He was America's polite, almost awkward host. It's a guy with a stone-faced delivery who somehow brought the rebellious energy of rock and roll right into the nation's living rooms. But here's the thing about Ed. That famous line, "We've got a really big show," hit a man of iron will and simmering resentments. Now, you might have heard a story that Ed Sullivan kept a secret list of the stars he despised. While there's no credible proof that a physical list ever existed, there's no question that behind the scenes, some of the biggest names in music got blacklisted from the greatest show on earth. These are the stories of the backstage battles and shocking confrontations with the six singers Ed Sullivan famously couldn't stand. Let's kick things off with a band that perfectly embodied the rebellious spirit Sullivan both used for ratings and personally disliked, the Rolling Stones. In the mid-60s, the Beatles had already won America over, partly thanks to their clean-cut debut on Sullivan's stage. Then came the Stones. If the Beatles were the boys next door, the Stones were the delinquents your parents warned you about. Their first appearance in October 1964 was pure chaos. The teenage girls in the audience screamed so loud that Sullivan himself got fed up, repeatedly yelling quiet at the crowd. Afterward, the network was flooded with complaints from viewers disgusted by the band's shaggy hair and surly attitude. Sullivan, ever mindful of his mainstream audience, publicly voiced his disapproval. But ratings talk, the Stones were a sensation, so of course he had them back. The real fireworks came on January 15, 1967. The band was set to perform their new single, "Let's Spend the Night Together." For 1960s network TV, that title was a hard no. The censors at CBS, along with Sullivan, demanded a change. The safer alternative, "Let's Spend Some Time Together." Backstage, Mick Jagger was furious, but the choice was simple: change the lyric or don't perform. Reluctantly, they agreed. But Mick Jagger wasn't about to be completely tamed. When the cameras rolled, he sang the sanitized line, "Let's spend some time together," but leaned into the camera and gave a massive sarcastic eye roll. It was a subtle, brilliant act of defiance. Sullivan, watching from the wings, was enraged. He felt Jagger had mocked him on his own show and furiously declared they were a band that this time lasted 2 years. It shows you who Sullivan was. His disdain for their rebellion was real. But his pragmatism as a showman meant even his bands had an expiration date, while rock stars were a predictable source of trouble. Our fifth entry shows that even a comedian Sullivan had personally championed could end up on the wrong side of his infamous temper. Jackie Mason was a fast-talking Borscht Belt comic and a recurring favorite on the show. But on October 18, 1964, their friendship and Mason's career were nearly destroyed over a simple hand gesture. The night was already tense. President Lyndon B. Johnson had interrupted the show for a national address, throwing the schedule into chaos. When the show returned, Mason was mid-monologue and running out of time. Off camera, a frantic Ed Sullivan held up 2 fingers, signaling 2 minutes, then 1 finger for 1 minute. Mason, a comedian through and through, decided to work it into his act. "I'm getting a lot of fingers tonight," he joked. "Here's a finger for you and a finger for you." From Sullivan's vantage point, it looked like Mason had just given him the middle finger on live TV. He was furious. The second Mason walked off stage, Sullivan confronted him, canceled his $45,000 6-show contract, and refused to pay him for the night. Sullivan publicly accused him of obscenity, and in the 1960s, That was a career death sentence. Mason insisted it was all a misunderstanding, claiming he didn't even know what the gesture meant at the time, believing he'd been wrongfully ruined. Mason sued for libel. Eventually, the matter was settled out of court. In a rare display of public humility, Sullivan invited Mason back on the show 2 years later and gave him a warm on-air apology, calling them old pals, news that surprised Mason himself. The damage, however, was done. Mason later said his career never fully recovered from the incident. It wasn't about pushing cultural boundaries. It was about authority. Sullivan thought he'd been mocked in his own house, and his reaction was swift and devastating. If you're enjoying this, look into the secret feuds of old Hollywood. Take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We dive into the biggest celebrity scandals and untold stories every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, back to the stars Ed Sullivan couldn't stand. At number 4 is an artist whose conflict wasn't a public blow-up, but a quiet act of artistic conviction that happened entirely behind the scenes. In May 1963, a 22-year-old Bob Dylan was about to make his national television debut on Sullivan's show, a career-making moment. He planned to perform his satirical song, Taken John Birch, Paranoid Blues, which poked fun at the ultra-conservative John Birch Society and Red Scare paranoia. During rehearsals, Sullivan himself reportedly heard the song and had no problem with it. The stage was set. But on the day of the show, a CBS network executive from Standards and Practices stepped in. He told Dylan the song was too controversial and that the network feared a lawsuit. They ordered him to play something else. This was the moment of truth. A young artist on the brink of stardom being told to compromise. But Dylan wasn't built that way. He politely refused. As the story goes, he told the producers, "If I can't play my song, I'd rather not appear on the show." And with that, he walked out. Interestingly, Sullivan was reportedly angry not at Dylan, but at his own network's censors. He felt that if they could air jokes about the president, they should be able to handle satire. The story of Dylan's walkout became a sensation, cementing his image as an artist of uncompromising integrity. The publicity he got from not being on the show probably did more for his counterculture credibility than the performance ever would have. He never did appear on The Sullivan Show, proving that his voice wasn't for sale, not even for the biggest audience in the world. This next feud wasn't about politics or dirty words. It was a raw clash of wills between the controlling host and a young rock and roll pioneer who refused to be told what to do. Buddy Holly and the Crickets had already appeared on the show once to a great reception, but their second appearance on January 26, 1958, became legendary for all the wrong reasons. The band planned to perform 2 songs, including their hit, "Oh Boy." Sullivan, however, thought the song was too rowdy for his audience and ordered Holly to play something else. Most artists would have just said yes. Buddy Holly wasn't most artists. He flatly refused, explaining he'd already promised his friends and family back home in Texas he'd be singing that song for them. Sullivan, stunned that anyone would question him, repeated the demand. Holly refused again. From that moment on, Sullivan was out for revenge. When he introduced the band on air, he deliberately mispronounced Holly's name, calling him Buddy Hollitt. But that wasn't all. According to the band members' recollections, Sullivan ordered the sound engineer not to turn up the volume on Holly's guitar for "Oh Boy." When Holly started playing, his guitar was practically silent. Thinking fast, he compensated by singing and playing with ferocious energy, cranking his own amp and telling the band to play louder. He overcame the sabotage and delivered a blistering performance. After the song, Holly gave a curt nod and walked off. Sullivan made it clear they were done. Tragically, there was no time to patch things up. Just over a year later, Buddy Holly died in a plane crash. The bitter feud became a permanent footnote, a story of what happened when an unstoppable new force in music met the immovable object of television's ultimate Gatekeeper. By 1967, no band represented the dark, poetic, and dangerous side of the counterculture like The Doors. An appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show on September 17, 1967, felt like a collision of worlds waiting to happen, and it did not disappoint. The band was set to perform their #1 hit, Light My Fire. Network censors, however, had a major issue with one line. Girl, we couldn't get much higher. In the 60s, higher was a clear reference to drugs, and it was a non-starter for Sunday night television. A producer told the band they had to change. The lyric to Girl, we couldn't get much better. According to the band, they nodded and agreed. Sullivan's team thought the problem was solved. They had seriously underestimated Jim Morrison. To him, his lyrics were poetry, and he wasn't about to censor his art for anyone. As the cameras rolled, the Doors launched into the song. When the big moment came, Morrison leaned into the mic. A slight smirk on his face, defiantly sang the original line, Girl, we couldn't get much higher, even emphasizing the forbidden word. Backstage, Sullivan was livid. He had been publicly double-crossed. After the performance, a producer stormed up to the band and told them, Mr. Sullivan wanted you for 6 more shows, but you'll never work the Ed Sullivan Show again. Jim Morrison's legendary response captured the shifting power dynamic perfectly. He just shrugged and said, Hey man, we just did the Ed Sullivan Show. He knew the one-time exposure was all they needed. The ban was permanent, a spectacular crash between the old guard and a new breed of artist who simply refused. Bo, the artist at the top of our list, had a conflict with Sullivan that was perhaps the most personal and bitter of them all. Bo Diddley was a founding father of rock and roll, a true original whose signature Bo Diddley beat influenced countless musicians. On November 20th, 1955, he was scheduled to appear on the show in what should have been a career-defining moment. He planned to play his hit song, Bo Diddley. But Sullivan informed him he would not be performing his own music. Instead, he was ordered to perform 16 Tons, a folk country hit made famous by Tennessee Ernie Ford. For Diddley, this was more than just a song change. It was a profound insult, asking him to erase his own musical identity on national TV. When the live broadcast began, Bo Diddley looked into the camera and launched right into his own song, Bo Diddley. He had defied a direct order from the most powerful man in television. When he walked off stage, he was met by a furious Sullivan. According to Diddley's own account years later, the host's anger was laced with prejudice. Diddley recalled Sullivan snarling at him, "You are the first black boy that ever double-crossed me." The alleged use of that racist and condescending term revealed the clash wasn't just about a song. It showed an anger rooted in a paternalistic worldview, where an artist's defiance was seen as a deep personal betrayal. Bo Diddley was banned for life. The door to mainstream stardom, which had been kicked open by pioneers like him, was slammed shut in his face by one man's need for absolute control. For over 2 decades, Ed Sullivan stood at the center of American pop culture, a kingmaker who wielded unbelievable power. But he was also a gatekeeper, and these stories reveal the price of admission to his kingdom. His feuds weren't just backstage drama. They were flashpoints in a cultural war between tradition and rebellion, censorship and artistic freedom. From the Stones' sarcastic eye roll to Jim Morrison's open defiance, each conflict reveals a different side of Sullivan. He was a complex man who, despite breaking racial barriers by featuring black artists, also demanded total control. These feuds, born from his legendary temper, have become as much a part of his legacy as the iconic performances he helped create. A reminder that the drama behind the curtain is often the most compelling part of the show. Which of these feuds surprised you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.